call the Thursday, June 16th, 2022, Common Council Community Wellness Committee meeting to order. So Councilmember Davies, I'm here, Councilmember Murphy here, and Councilmember Falco.
Here.
All right, any corrections to the minutes of May 16th? I don't believe so. Right, and I don't think we formally have to accept them because we're a committee, but we can certainly just accept them if you will. So topics, looking at this today, we felt it was a pause moment. We've had several different, and thank you, Doctor, for setting up our different guests. One, I felt like we should have some time to talk about our invited guests and get a list of some more people to invite. We talk about people, but then I don't think we kind of settled in on anybody and kind of setting it up. So I feel like I need to have a little more thinking about what we're going to be doing, and then we can contact them. And then the second thing we discussed tonight is the Community Wellness Summit. Luke has been doing a great job of kind of communicating with some of the facilitators, so I think we need to talk about that. The facilitators have a little different ideas, so there's some pieces that we need to work through, so I'll probably most of our time that we'll be spending there. I guess before we get going on that, Chiefs, are there any updates of anything that would be pertinent that we should know, or kind of business as usual? Sorry to be on the spot.
Well, we were talking at the Solutions Panel today that we've seen a decrease essentially in opioid overdoses, but we're seeing a massive increase in methamphetamine usage. So, it's a push down, pop up, ebb and flow of different trending drugs. This seems to be reiterated by the hospital emergency network. So they tend to agree that there's been an increase in methamphetamine, a decrease in opioids. That's a mixed bag, different drugs, different addiction issues. We have seen a decrease in mental health calls for service between commitments for 941, 945 by about 30% over the last year. I think that's largely pandemic driven. There's less feelings of hopelessness now than there was a year ago. So that's a positive note.
Pardon my ignorance. With opioids, Narcan seems to be kind of like, if not a miracle, but a really big help in treating. Is there anything like that for meth, for things going on with meth?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, you just, if someone's off the wall and out of control, you sedate them and to a level of where they're just unconscious.
Okay. Thanks, Chiefs. So invited guests, I really felt like I needed to get some more guidance on you. What do we want to focus on? Dr. You've helped us kind of identify some folks. Where do we want to go next with inviting guests to our July and August, September meetings as well? Thoughts? I don't have a name in mind, but perhaps someone we can try to find that fits the mold. We've been talking a lot about looking towards, hopefully, working to get the mental health unit back open at Fox. If any of our, and I know we're kind of in a necessarily hospital desert, but they're few and far between, representatives from hospitals have potentially gone through this before. I'm not sure. Again, I know everyone around us is Bassett, but I don't know. Albany probably hasn't done this, but in fact, not this why I didn't have a name, but just if there's anybody that's done this before, that's lost a service and brought it back, and maybe talk to us about, maybe not particularly mental health, which would be great to find someone that has experience in that, but bringing these services back to a hospital that's been lost, and kind of what has to be done to get those back. That doesn't sound too
Well, I think the first step is you need to have providers. And I think that's probably your biggest issue, is that there's just there's really not a real big vacuum here to draw them in, and mental health practitioners are few and far between.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably going to be the first hiccup. I know that they've spoken about having Fox reopen a crisis care unit here over the years, but it's also given recent changes in legislation as far as the regulations for the mental health unit is rather cost prohibitive, and I think that their opening for the unit would cost them a minimum of about $3 million. And that's before staff.
Yeah. I think the two things I'd really like to, two folks I'd like to speak to, not particular people, but folks that are dealing directly with homeless. Are there organizations right now working to try to get folks into homes? And I think I know the answer to that's probably no, but those that are working with homeless, I'd really like to hear from them and understand some of the challenges. And we certainly heard from you, both of you, and appreciate that, but just those folks that are working, what's out there, what's going on, what are some of the challenges? Everything I've been reading and there, it's really consistent with what you've just said prior to the start of this meeting, that getting folks into homes so that you can then bring services consistently to them. I think we've heard from that from you as well. So, that are the organizations working on that, I guess, is what I'd like to know. The second thing is in reference to mental health, we heard from Dr. Fidel the last time that, last meeting, that we do not have any good mental health care among children. And I feel like I really want to explore that more and understand what are the limitations, what are the challenges, what are the problems, why is that the case? So all I'm doing is talking about issues. I don't know anybody that deals with these particular areas, but I feel like these are two issues I'd like to dive in a little bit more, because they seem to be pretty important issues.
I think there are both homeless coalitions and a mental health commission of sorts in the city. I'm pretty sure there are. I can confirm that for you. Because yes, those are people, if those are the projects we want to look toward, I think those are the people we want to partner with. And mental health, I think getting the inpatient back is a huge piece of it, but there's also all the outpatient stuff, which is not really Bassett, is the county mental health clinic. And I think that has been understaffed. So, yeah, finding out who the players are there, I can help do that. In terms of getting the mental health inpatient back, or even a more active crisis center at Fox, that's really the will of Bassett. But if we could put any political pressure on them as a city, maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, and I'm with you, and I am and will continue to have those conversations. I can say that staffing is such an issue for everyone, seemingly, and I know in the case of Bassett's network, I think it's something like 2,500 would be their full staffing, and I think they're down 800, which is
100%.
how you manage, right? And so they are, in fact, looking at what do they cut, so it's a tough conversation, but I will advocate for it.
So County Mental Health Services, run by Jeanette Pavlis. She's got an office here in Oneonta. We speak frequently. She wasn't at the meeting today, was she? She wasn't at the meeting today. And they actually have partnered in a lot of instances with MCAT to do outreach in the community. But even with the MCAT workers that they have that are available, which I think are 2 for this area, they still have quite a lot on their plate.
Chief, what's MCAT?
Mobile Crisis Assessment Team.
Okay, thank you.
They're based out of Utica. And we forward them regularly between the fire department and my department, people that could use a referral that we feel might be deteriorating in their capacity. And they'll do outreach to them if we can get them contact information, so we try to forward that to them so that they can do outreach.
Sometimes they can come to where you are with the person to avoid a visit to the emergency room.
Right, that's exactly right.
Sometimes they actually come to the emergency room because you don't have psychiatric providers at the hospital. So they work kind of...
They do, and last I knew, Fox now had at least one grant-funded social worker position.
Oh, good.
So there is somebody that's there, I think, during at least daytime hours.
Who funds MCAT? Is that the county or is that?
I don't know, it could very well be a grant-funded organization.
Okay. And I think you gave me Jeanette's number earlier, email.
She would be the person to talk to about the status of local mental health services, because she's the coordinator for mental health throughout the county.
Okay. And she had
She's
decided,
great, she's from the Utica area, so she's very, she knows the area pretty well and has had a lot of experience working with that population, just simply by Utica being a bigger area.
right. And she had signed with somebody else, or if there's someone, a gentleman that she worked with, that she thought would be a good addition to advisory council, so I can reach out to her if we think that'd be a good person, or.
I think she'd be a great start, for sure.
Okay, sounds good. And then, Doc, you mentioned the homeless coalition. I mean, maybe if there's representatives or if there's a.
I texted Dan just now, I haven't heard back. No, I'll find out for you. I think, the woman who came to our meeting a couple times ago, wasn't she working with the homeless? Remember her?
I know, I lost her business card, but yeah, she was with RSS, I think,
Oh,
right?
well, she was part of RSS, but I think she also did things in addition, so maybe I could be wrong. But yeah, I'll find out for you. And also, I was thinking in terms of the mental health piece, specifically around kids, because I know that is really an area where there's lacking services. Someone maybe from the school's social worker or a nurse.
Each school's got a social worker, so the kids have, I think, in many ways, better access to social workers than adults at large, because they can identify issues through the classroom and be referred to social workers within the school.
But see, then what I've heard is that once kids are identified, there are no mental health providers in the community to get them into. That's what's but maybe just having one of those social workers give us a report so so we can understand how the system
I would
works.
expect at that point it would probably be, Tom Brindley would be at least point of contact to assign somebody to come, or at least refer you to who in his district he would suggest.
I can reach out to Tom. So we have two definite ones there. Luke, your suggestion, I feel like that might be a tough one, but we might want to see if there are other, maybe do some research to try to identify people. Can we Zoom somebody in? If for a guest present, we can't.
Not really. Not until we figure out what we're doing.
Maybe what we can do is at least, at the very least, correspond with them and be able to get some information. All right, so it sounds like we have two folks here, at least, there. If there's any other suggestions, open to it, but I can reach out to folks and begin to see whether we can, we'll have three if we're able to get some from the homeless coalition, and see if we can set these up. I just feel like, for me, that was really informative, listening to some of the folks that are kind of on the front lines dealing with things as well, to help kind of.
Would you like to try to come to another solutions panel meeting, and I can just email the group and we can get Tom Brindley and Jeanette and everybody that you're looking for as far as contacts in one spot, and you have an opportunity to kind of pick their brain a little bit and maybe set up something where they can at least, do some homework and have some contact information?
Remind me, you meet, I know Thursdays, what?
Thursdays at 2.
2. Yeah, I would. I just need to get it on my calendar so I don't.
Okay, so today was our meeting, so it'll be 2 weeks from today, 2 p.m. will be the next meeting.
Okay. So look up the date on that.
And if you just email me with what you're looking for, I can send that out to the group, and hopefully we can get everybody in the same room.
Okay.
Same Zoom.
Mark, 2 weeks from today is,
The 30th.
Thank
I
you.
just sent you a calendar invite.
You're on top of things. Thank you. Thanks, Sheet. I will go out your way and and I would love to be there. We can maybe put
Yeah,
together.
and I'll just, we do it up front so you can get it right out there, right off the bat, and then hopefully, if you've got 15 minutes or more, you'll have all the time that you need, and we can go from there.
Sounds good, sounds good. So I'll reach out to you folks and kind of start kind of gathering some questions that you might want to ask, as you're suggesting, get it into them beforehand, so that we can kind of prep that, and yeah, that'd be good. Thanks for that suggestion. All right, anything else on that, or should we move on to the Community Wellness Summit?
I think that sounds, especially for the next couple of months, that sounds, it sounds like we've got another path going. Sounds good to me. What do you think, Emily?
Sounds good.
That may be another good topic for you to bring also on the summit to that meeting, because there may be some interested parties there as well.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Yeah, good suggestion. All right, well, I guess let's get into that, and so Luke, if you would, thank you. If you can kind of update us on the conversations that you've had, and I think those will kind of begin to prompt a little bit of conversation. So we're, trying to begin to think about how we move forward with Community Wellness Summit. Luke met with the facilitator, has some feedback, I guess worth listening to.
Yeah, so this all started, in my graduate program, one of the techniques we learned was facilitation. I am not a facilitator, but I know some folks that were. So I reached out to my contacts at my previous program and was put in touch with Leanne Hirabayashi. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing. But she and her colleague do facilitation, I believe, for, I can only pull up my email here. I was hoping to bring it with me, but I didn't get back from work in time. She and her partner are professional facilitators. They work with communities, organizations across the spectrum for everything. And I filled them in on what we're trying to do, what we're hoping to do to the best of my ability, and they recommended a format, and they offered to facilitate. We'll talk sorry guys. Talk about costs in a little bit, but what they suggested was something that sounds really immersive. They've done it a few times before. It's called a Whole System in a Room, where there are constituents from all parties. If we're working with, for example, our homeless population, we would want obviously providers, folks from the fire department, police department, city representatives, as well as members from that population to be at the summit. And they said it's typically very immersive. It's typically 2.5 days. And it is, they said they get a really, one of the big things that they have noted from this is that the conversation continues beyond the room. So beyond the summit, I guess it would be, because it is so immersive, apparently. Taking this with a grain of salt, I know nothing about facilitation. I did a very brief workshop about 5 years ago, so this is what they told me. But one of the things I think we probably should talk about first is what we're kind of envisioning from it. I kind of gave them what we were thinking about, doing a day-long summit, which they thought could work. They suggested this ulterior method, but granted that all of us are busy. This is obviously a priority, but being realistic, 3 days is a lot of time to block out. 2 full days and a half day is, I think, something that we should probably discuss before we go much further.
And can you mention the timeline that they had in mind?
Oh, yeah, yes, sorry about that. And I included our timeline. We were hoping the beginning of August, if I'm not mistaken. They felt that in order to get as many people on board with enough notice, because it is a couple of days, they suggested early January.
Wow.
Yes. So, again, I don't know enough about this process to probably ask all the questions I should. I did my best, but I guess that's what I have.
So responses to that, and then I guess we can begin kind of unpacking some of that, and I think you asked a really important question that I don't want to get lost, is what do we see from the summit? What are we trying to do here? And I think maybe clarifying that would be helpful, and then thinking about this a little bit more.
Yeah, if I can jump in. Yeah, so I think your inclination is right, that people are busy, so tailoring this to something that might be more well-attended, because people will be able to take a day as opposed to, twice, 250% of that time. That's probably a smart strategy.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, you're right on, Mark, is what are we trying to accomplish? What do we want to walk away from this with? There should be some sense that there's an action plan that will be generated from this. So it's not, obviously we talked about, establishing a baseline and getting as much information as we can, building the foundation, but what is it that we want to do? What do we want to accomplish? We should have a reasonable goal, but we should have a goal.
Right, so from what I remember, the goal was that, there are all these different services, right, in our county and in the city that are available, but like, where are the gaps in between, right? And that's like kind of what we want to identify, and then, once we have that information, then how can the city possibly, come in and help facilitate either bridging those gaps or filling those gaps, right? So, I don't know, is it worth waiting till January for something like that? Is it, I also, when I worked at Cornell, we put on different symposia and stuff, and, they were several, many months out trying to organize speakers and different things like this for these big, especially if you have, are we gonna invite people that want to, that are gonna have to travel maybe for this, I guess it just depends on how big do we want this to be, or is it that we want to organize some kind of meeting with representatives from different types of services? Identify what there is, and then have a meeting with all those people, or if it is something that needs to be bigger and have a facilitator. I don't know, I'm just asking a question.
Sure. Exactly,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree, that was my thinking, was get folks in the room around some of the central issues. I feel like we look at the trifecta of issues: homeless, addiction, and mental health. That's been obviously brought up several times, that those three kind of are together. Obviously, we're tasked with more than that, but those three seem to be coupled. So focusing on that, and then beginning to, in each of those areas, and on this breakout groups, hopefully with representatives from all the different areas, look at what are the gaps, what are the overlaps, what are the strengths, what do we need to work on, which would begin to give us, it's almost like using it as a kind of focus group to allow us to understand what we need to do, or what role we need to play in facilitating more action, and then again, filling in behind that with grants possibly, or at least maybe trying to get coordination of different groups. That was my thinking about the event. And I agree, I mean, I know what they're trying to do, and I've been part of these as well, and I appreciate, but I guess I'm really concerned about wasting people's time.
No,
this is disrespectful to them, but.
No, I totally agree. That's why I was trying to include everybody in the email, because it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of, I wasn't sure if it was the right fit. So.
Right, and I just pull back, not to say it wouldn't be a waste of time to do something like that, but it's a lot of time.
Oh, sure, no, I get what you're saying.
By that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, my thinking was, what I was envisioning was more of a kind of a half day, maybe a 3-hour type of thing, where we are, we start with kind of a, what we're trying to do, what the goal of this particular committee is. I don't know, very quick on the spot to kind of talk about what your vision was for kind of establishing this, kind of set the tone for what we're trying to do here as a community, and then break out to those particular groups and begin to kind of look at the, where we are, where are the gaps, what are the services that are offered, and kind of begin to facilitate those conversations.
Well, and I think that, Granted, I'm not the expert here, but I think that could be our guiding things, keeping the questions open. What are we doing, what are our strengths? What are we missing? What doesn't work? Maybe could be a question that we ask. Because if we're breaking into groups and we, if we, keeping the questions big and maybe keeping it to 4 or 5 of them, really kind of digging in those few hours on those questions could be something we could do. Again, not being super privy to this process, we probably have those questions ahead of time. And think about a time of maybe our next meeting, maybe we can do it tonight, coming up with those questions for the summit.
Mhm.
So again, I'm just going to jump in real quick, but so I think what we know, just from the list of people and agencies and institutions that we're talking about bringing, and you have been bringing to this for information's sake, that there are a lot of people who are essentially their task of their agency or organization is to provide some sort of a net, to catch people, in some fashion to keep them from, going further to the pavement, let's just say, to kill a metaphor. But what I think that this potentially might do would be to bring some of these partners together, some of these players together, and look at how you can weave something that's a larger net, identify areas that aren't being addressed. There doesn't seem to be, anything to catch. We mentioned, young people and mental health issues, or whatever. As we identify that there are holes in the net, that maybe by collecting these individuals, agencies, organizations, representatives, that we're able to kind of weave something that, through the city's engagement, provides something that's a little less porous. And by virtue of doing that, you are, I think that is, as much as anything else, what I was hoping that the goal of this committee would be to do more by bringing together collectively the resources that are currently in play, and identify those areas where we need to address in some sort of creative fashion how we can make this a stronger, less porous net. So it's just in a metaphorical sort of a language. That's what I'm looking at. And I think that you were identifying the players. You've been identifying the players, and in the process of interviewing them, you've also been identifying where they're facing challenges. And so getting those players in a room and identifying collectively, where the challenges are, where the holes are, and then, creatively engaging, we may be able to make some progress.
So, yes, to me, I see it like 2 things. One is the gaps, and being really clear about how we might be able to focus and get some support for covering those gaps by maybe a very creative project. The other thing I think about is root cause, and that's even more broad and comprehensive. It reminds me, I was at a conference a few years ago, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and it was Culture of Health, so again, very broad strokes. And the keynote speaker was a chief of police, was a woman from some big city in Scotland, where they had a huge amount of knife violence. And the charge there was to address knife violence, but they took it all the way back. And what they found was where intervention needed to occur was like in early childhood, in supporting those homes where there was neglect or unwanted pregnancies, taking it way back to the root cause. I'm not saying you're going to prevent all addiction and mental health problems, because it doesn't all flow from that. And some people just struggle because they struggled regardless of the resources they had as children. But still, I think it would be really interesting to see if we could sort of, as well as looking at gaps, looking at some root causes and what other people in the community see those as, and do something really meaningful there. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we as a resource, we have a college here who has a pretty vibrant early childhood program. That might be a good place to start as far as childhood development, and being able to look at that and see if there's anything that the colleges might be able to help with too, because they could have potential benefits to the community as far as internships or...
Absolutely. Right, so if I'm hearing you correctly, it's a two-pronged approach. One, to address the problem right now, which is the gap. Two, to proactively try to address the root causes by getting at that, and I appreciate that as well, because you got my head thinking about all the different alternatives and possibilities we can do with that. And if that's the outcome, that we're able to identify gaps and able to identify some root causes, and then maybe able to even brainstorm some approaches, or at least have maybe a group of people committed to trying to address each of these coming out of this, that would be working, we would work closely with them in terms of what's going on. And again, the facilitation role that we would play, maybe we can begin getting out these. And then again, what's out there, what's available, how do we do this, what ideas do we have, how do we use our own internal opportunities, like the leverage the
Sounds like a good doctoral thesis to me. It's a pretty, isolated microcosm of society, and if you implement programs that are effective, that could be a game winner in a lot of different ways, so I think you might be able to get some interest there.
Right.
Called the Oneonta model.
What's that?
Called the Oneonta model.
I guess I'm now envisioning it. In some ways, I think this is something we can handle. I think that it identifies you suggested questions. I think we would need to find, and maybe less of professional facilitators, and I certainly agree. Maybe that's the next step, right? We start this way, we begin to do it, and maybe there's a bigger dialogue that we build to that can have a greater level of commitment in it. But, finding a group of people or several people who would be interested in being able to facilitate the conversation with small pockets or small groups of people, I think might be easier, and we might be able to find volunteers. In fact, we might, amongst this particular group that would be contacted, be able to find people that might be able to, or be interested in doing this as well. Does that seem to make sense conceptually as we're seeing this? Is this work, and can we do this?
I think so. I think we can. Within the framework we've talked about, I think so.
So it sounds like, next week, I think kind of framing this thing out, getting the questions involved, identifying the folks, setting the date. There's a lot of kind of coordination with this event that we need to do. I was talking to the person about scheduling yesterday, and we don't have a set date, but we can certainly try to figure out the kind of audits we need to do, schedule it, and then begin contacting our folks. So let me do that in terms of action items. I will secure our facility. I wanted to make sure after we started talking, you were thinking, or they were thinking January. I thought, let me not go ahead on this. So why don't I take a first step at kind of framing this out for what it would look like in terms of the summit, how we would do it, and then get it out to everyone, and then we can begin kind of adding some questions in it based on the framework. Again, I'm seeing the three areas, the trifecta of issues that we would have the breakout groups, and they can focus on those gaps, focus on those root causes, and then kind of move the conversation from what is out there, what is, to what could be in terms of potentially action items that come out of this. I'm all about trying to come up with action items out of these types of summits so that they guide future action. And so then that, again, to me, I think that would be we can handle that, and then we have a real nice set of ideas that we're able to now take back, work with our community partners, and begin to identify and figure out what's out there. What can we do? Do we have conversations with colleges? Do we need to start looking at grants in this particular area? Do we need to get these two groups talking a little more, maybe facilitate a conversation between these two organizations? There seems to be quite a bit of overlap, and hopefully some of that will take place within the event. I mean, I think that this is maybe not the scale and level that the folks that you were speaking to have in mind, but maybe this is the scale and level that we can do, and we can do now.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of getting this off the ground in August at some point. You know, does that work?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
That sounds good. I do think it is something that we can handle. I mean, how many organizations have we identified a list of organizations that we've already won?
Yeah, I've got that.
I know that we had something, but how many is it, like approximately? Like how many people are we talking?
I think I'm up to about 20, 22. I mean, it's a pretty broad
So
range.
that's
So this
pretty
is,
reasonable.
yeah,
It's not like we have like, 200 organizations each with,
no.
that's a lot of people.
And maybe each organization brings a couple people, so I mean,
Could be 60, could be 75, something like that.
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, this sounds good.
So I'll sketch that out and then get that over to everyone soon, and probably this weekend, so I can get some things done, and then we can kind of hack away at it. I'm seeing like 3 hours. I think kind of a late afternoon type of thing. What did we talk about morning? What did we talk about the last time we spoke about this?
You don't think, I only remember early August, before school started, we were talking about.
Okay.
Would we all have, like first or second week of August?
Would late afternoon work?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see what I can get, and then again, I'll frame that out and get it out to everybody, and we can get kind of, and then I think in our next, we should actually probably, we don't have to wait till the next meeting in July, we can probably assign some, when is our next meeting?
Right now,
Thank you.
working on.
We need to probably assign some tasks prior to that, so maybe we can do that online, it's just kind of, see what people are doing, assign some tasks.
Monday the 18th.
July. Yeah, so we're gonna need that, that's gonna be kind of in my mind, wrapping things up at that point. Everyone probably want to launch the invite pretty quickly.
Yeah, because we're less than 2 months out.
Right.
That sounds good.
Okay. The other thing I would say, keep in mind facilitators, people that might be able to facilitate the conversation. I see that we probably need 3 if we have the breakout groups in terms of the particular issues. And again, maybe out of the group of people that we're inviting, there was someone who we might identify as being a good facilitator. Chief, you probably have a better idea of some of the personalities, and you might even know someone who might be good at that kind of role. And I'm not putting you on the spot now, you certainly can, but if there's anybody who comes to mind, it might be kind of good for facilitating would be good. So,
Can I just add one thing for discussion?
yeah, please.
If you're gonna have 3 breakout groups, and I'm just thinking like in our panel, if there was 3 breakout groups, because there's such a lack of resources, if you take behavioral health and substance abuse and have that as a single item, there's not gonna be enough individuals in those breakout groups because they work across both sides of it.
Good call.
Like we want you in each group.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, maybe rather than breakout groups, it's these 3 topics, and we hit each of these 3 topics, talking about the gaps and talking about the root causes, and that's how we do it. Is that what you're thinking?
I think it would be,
Yeah, I think it would be, so, my experience in this is that all parties really are interested parties. So, given this to be your first go at this, having the most people involved in the biggest conversation, and then try to figure out through maybe feedback from that group as to how to better organize future events might be valuable, but I think up front, I'm going to have to agree with Chief Knapp in that it'd probably be best to turn it into more of a facilitated discussion amongst practitioners and multidisciplinary teams.
Thank you, well taken. And that certainly needs to be there as one facilitator.
Yeah, then I think it's just a matter of keeping everybody on task as far as conversation goes.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like that's the biggest challenge, like you can get everyone in a room, but maybe just having like, all right, for this first hour, this is what we're going to talk about, and, like have set questions, right, but then it's like, okay, now we're moving on, right? Like, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, that's why it's so important, I think, to get such a good facilitator. That'll really help us stay on track.
So I've been asked to speak at a lot of criminal justice classes, and I find that if you show up with a list of talking points or questions, or you're just going to speak at a group, my impression is you get a lot less engagement than if you show up with, a show opener and allow people to steer the conversation. Because then the people that are interested parties that have knowledge of the subject matter are able to speak, and someone's able to ask a question, and someone also have a comment. And it's, I think, a better flow of information, especially if you're talking about people at that level. They're all educated professionals that are, accustomed to having conversations. So, I think that it'll probably end up running itself.
Right.
I've been in a lot of facilitated things as a participant, and one technique that I can see this being amenable to, given that, yes, we've identified these three big issues. We know there's a lot of overlap, especially both in terms of gaps and root causes, but asking the participants to, just throw out there homelessness, what do you think are the gaps? What do you think are the root causes? Then you have all these answers that the audience has generated, and then you start to group them and see the commonalities in your answers, and then they start forming patterns, and then ultimately you find your action items from that process. That's just a process, but in that way, you're having all the wisdom of the people that are your participants contributing when you lay out a structure for them, which is, we've already identified these big issues, and how do we address them? I don't know, that's just a thought.
Yeah.
A lot of big, group facilitation processes I've been in have sort of begun that way. But I agree, starting off with a very compelling introduction, describing, what we want to see happen.
Right, just to have some sort of an end goal as far as what it is that you're looking to accomplish. And really, I think the big question is, what can be done right now, where we are, with what we have? Because we're not getting, the assumption should be we're not getting anything else. Right? It's nice to think that we might be able to get $1 billion in aid, but the reality is that we're limited to what we already have because it's a tax base. So unless there's a substantial grant opportunity, which you might or might not get, especially based on the population of the county, we're dealing with what we have right now. Really, it's, I think, a matter of networking and communicating with people that haven't communicated with each other, and being able to open those avenues of conversation.
Sorry, notes. I feel like we've got enough here to frame something out, and then kind of run it past everyone. And Chiefs, if you're open, I'd like to include you in that list as well, and get your feedback. And then as we can begin to frame this, I think we can get a better idea of maybe someone would come to mind that can help facilitate this, as well as then our invite to the practitioners, once we can have it, we've framed it in terms of, what we're trying to do, our objectives and what we're trying to accomplish here, we can frame that with our invite and our letters and move that along. It seems that a lot of this will have to go, will have to be online or kind of not online, but, back and forth email over the next month as we really try to move this along. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add to this? I mean, I feel like we have a kind of better idea of what we'd like to accomplish, and it does seem like something we can accomplish now or in August, and we can accomplish ourselves as well. Is there anything else?
And you'll loop me into it.
Oh, yeah, no, that was everybody, and I just was including the chiefs as well, so we'll include Carrie in that too. Anything else?
Thank you for putting the framework together.
No, not a problem. Old school teacher, so I feel pretty comfortable putting that together, a little lesson plan, if you will, so. I should say, school teacher a while ago, I'm not a So, all right, well, thank you everyone for your time, for your input. This, I think, was kind of productive in terms of framing out this particular, this event. But I think that, again, we can do this. So please, I'll get that out to everyone soon and let me know where we're at.
And I just want to say, because I'm here to help, if there's something that comes up and you're like, hey, Emily, can you just do this, or, just shoot me an email.
So honestly, what I was thinking, because you often talk about the fact that you have pretty good graphic experience and things like that.
Absolutely.
My thinking was a good invitation, that we're able to get that out to people and send an electronic invitation to folks and cue them that way. And then, we can easily set up and they can do, we can have a QR code on the invitation, which will then kind of we can have as a kind of a Google site to be able to keep our invitation list. Then we know exactly how many people, what places they're coming from, everything else. So that, my thought immediately went to that. I just, move that direction. If you're comfortable, not being on the spot, but I think that would certainly really allow your skills to be able to help with this particular challenge.
Absolutely.
Yes, Dr.
I just got an email or a text, I'll read to you. I asked if there was a homeless coalition in the city, and it says from here. For homeless, there's the Friends of the Homeless Group, headed by Patricia Leonard, who was that the woman that was here, of Family Services?
Yes.
Patricia Leonard. And OFO is part of a smaller group that collaborates on active cases, so you might know about that, and with various collaborations with the HUD Continuum of Care. Whatever that is. In mental health, there is the Community Service Board, which he's also on, and its subcommittees, including mental health, disabilities, and addiction. So do we have someone from the Community Service Board that we... So I'm happy to find out who is on the Community Service Board and both their subcommittees of mental health and addictions. Are you aware of these?
I know they exist in county level.
Okay. All right.
And I just had email with Patricia Leonard, introductory email today.
Oh,
So
okay.
perfect timing. I can then follow up on that email and say, oh, by the way, there's something else we're thinking about. So let's see what she says about that.
Great. So I'll leave that with you, and I'll find out about the Community Service Board more and get back to you on the email about that.
Okay,
That sound okay?
that sounds perfect. Thank you very much. And what was the name of it again? It was the Homeless Coalition, what was the name of it?
For homeless, there's the Friends of the Homeless,
Ah.
apparently group, headed up by Patricia Leonard.
Okay.
And then you said OFO does.
And then he said OFO is part of a smaller group that collaborates on active cases. So that's why I thought you might know about that. And the various collaborations with the HUD Continuum of Care. Whatever that means. Mental health, there's a Community Service Board, which has subcommittees on mental health, disabilities, and addiction.
I imagine the HUD board is probably where a lot of the finances come from.
Is HUD's state or federal? Federal.
Federal, Housing and Urban Development.
Yep.